deep inside the piney woods of northeast Texas. You are listening to Talk of the Night. And now, your host, Paranormal Phil. From deep inside the piney woods of northeast Texas. You are listening to From the Night. And now, deep inside the piney woods of northeast Texas. You are listening to Talk of the Night. And now, your host, Paranormal Phil.
Okay, sorry about that.
Hey, thanks for having me on tonight.
It's a
Pleasure
great
being here.
pleasure. So, tell the listeners, viewers.
Sure, sure. I actually got my start. I moved to South Florida from Ohio after high school. I'll just say a long time ago. We'll leave it at that. and came to came to Florida. Went to college. At some point, frankly, ran out of money. So I got into my law enforcement career a little bit early, and I went to work in the Dade County Jail in Miami. And I was just a kid. I was just barely 20 years old, and that's where I've had my first notable paranormal experience. Always had the interest in things that were unknown, but I never had an experience as a kid like a lot of people do. It wasn't until I was in the jail that night, just barely 20 years old. Uh, they had sent me up to one of the floors. The old Dade County Jail, and I guess it's still in use now, was 10 stories tall.
Mhm.
It's 10 stories tall. It took up about a whole city block in downtown Miami. And I got sent up to the fourth floor, which is the floor where they held folks that had mental health issues as well as being on
Okay.
suicide watch. And they sent me up there to help out, and I'm just sitting in the control booth, and I'm just looking down at out the lobby in front of me. I'm of course in an enclosed booth
Mhm.
with a door out the back, and I'm looking at the lobby. I'm looking at the elevator that's in front of me, and three wings that go all the way down, three cell blocks.
Yeah.
At the end of each cell blocks was another uh, barred door. And on the other side of that door, you could see the catwalk that went around the outside of the entire floor. You could check into the cell block. So that's
Mhm.
two ways we had to check on the guests, shall we say. Well, anyway, I'm just sitting there minding my own business, and I clearly see a tall, lanky gentleman in what looked like to be a uniform go across the catwalk right to left. Nothing spooky, nothing see through, nothing that would have indicated to me it was anything other than perhaps our lieutenant that had
So,
snuck up to
so it
catch
looked
a plane.
like just as real as me and you.
Absolutely. There was nothing spooky about it, nothing scary, except somebody was in the catwalk. Naturally, I assumed it was our lieutenant. Now, the only two ways you could get up there was A, by the elevator, which was right in front of me, and nobody came up that. And the other way was a stairwell that was right behind the control booth. Well, I saw this person. I hollered at the two guys in the booth with me, hey, LT is on the catwalk. And they shot out the back end. One went right, one went left, came all the way around. They
Mhm.
walked back into the control booth. Hey, Lawson, there's nobody there. I'm
Mhm.
telling you, this is what I saw.
Yeah.
Oh, this place is haunted. Stuff like that happens all the time. So that was my first encounter, as you will.
Okay, so you said that you really,
No,
um, like me, I had my first experience when I was 5 years old.
Hmm.
and but I was kind of meant for it,
Hmm.
just because I am. Well, a lot of people would call me psychic. I'm more of a hyper empath. Um, I can see the spirits. I can communicate with them. I can feel their presence, even if I can't see them. Uh, all that stuff. So I guess I was born into it, and I told people many times on my show.
Sure. Well, as we yeah.
Any kind of like traumatic thing that might have awakened that, or was it just
No,
a
no.
random thing?
It was a random thing, caught me by surprise. Growing up, my mother was very interested in the unusual, the UFOs and things like that. She used to read or Chariots of the Gods was a big book that was out when I was young. Uh, so there was always an interest in there. And I think my career on the line was mostly as a detective because I've always had this desire to try and find out the answers too. So I think this event happening to me, as well as a couple other little things that happened along the way, piqued my interest. And because my background is as a detective, I just decided I needed to find out what this whole thing was.
Okay, so I mean, it makes it that maybe had died in the prison, or was it just that one?
Well, there was a kind of a sidebar to this one incident. The metal cell block that I actually saw the figure cross over on the catwalk. Uh, I had checked that. You had to check. You had to go down each cell block through the lobby once, I think every hour, if memory serves. It's been a long time ago now.
Yeah,
And then you
no
assign
worries.
log, especially this cell block here, because it's where the folks that were on suicide watch were kept. And I'd gone down there and checked it, had signed the log. Um, and I went back down there not long after this incident occurred. And in front of one of the cells, neatly folded, was a bed sheet. Now, this is going to sound kind of cruel, I guess, but it was the way of the time.
Mhm.
In the cell block where folks were on suicide watch, they were not allowed to have bed sheets
Yeah.
because they could use them to harm themselves. So they would not sleep with have bed sheets on their beds. Well, here's this bed sheet sitting in front of this cell block, and I came out holding it like, "Whoa, who put this down there?"
Hmm.
And they looked at me and they said, "Lawson, you were the last one down there." And it's true, I was. But in front of this cell was this folded bed sheet. And came to find out that that was the last cell that somebody hung themselves with a bed sheet in.
Wow.
Now, I'm willing to accept that somehow maybe somebody played a joke. I don't know how
Yeah.
they could have, but I'm willing to accept that. But what is absolutely without question happened was watching that figure go from right to left, right in front of me. There's
Mm.
nothing that could change. So that's what really I can't say that's what sent me on the journey that I'm on now, but it never left me. In fact, I still see that incident just like it happened yesterday. I can see it in my mind's eye
Yeah.
because it was that stark, that that pretty awesome event actually.
Yeah, and trust me, I know all about it. I've had many experiences in different aspects of the paranormal. I've had Bigfoot sightings. I've had UFO sightings that I couldn't explain. Um, so it's always drew an interest to me. I guess since I was little, but it's always great to hear somebody else's experience at the same time.
Hmm. Not while I was working. Didn't have a lot of that happen. There were things that would occur on the job that were questionable. That you'd hear something, you'd see something, but I didn't have anything that was that stark while I was actually on duty at that point. Um, the next thing that really hit home was probably a number of years later. I was actually I was the director of the police academy for this region of Florida, and I had taken my son up to St. Augustine. My oldest boy, he was just turning 11, I think, at the time. So this is around 2010, and St. Augustine is just a few hours north of us. And we'd seen an episode of the old Ghost Hunters, with Jason and Grant. They'd done an
Mm,
episode in the St. Augustine Lighthouse, and they got caught something. They had a camera that was at the base of the stairwell that went to the top of the lighthouse, and they caught something looking over. In a fraction of a second, it was another flight up. In a fraction of a second, it was another flight up. And to my knowledge, it's never been debunked. I don't know if you're familiar with that episode or not, but
I believe
Ryan,
I've watched it a few times.
most of us have. Well, anyway, we went up there, and we were sitting on the fourth floor of, I'm sorry, I'm going to back up. We took the tour. It was Dark of the Moon tour. Highly recommend it. Went through the tour, and Ryan's like, Dad, can we do it again? It was great. I said, well, we're not driving back to Vero tonight. So yeah, we'll go again. It was just a 2 hour tour.
Mm,
Did it again. And the uh, gentleman who was running the tours, the tour guide, said, look, you already been through this once. I got a smaller group. Tell you what, I'm going to take everybody to the gatekeeper's house. And would you guys like to have the lighthouse to yourself for an hour or so? Cool. So Ryan and I are in the lighthouse. We're about fourth floor up, just sitting there. Now, quick backstory was when the lighthouse was being rebuilt in, I think, around 1879 or something like that.
I think it was around that
The,
year.
I'm sorry.
I think it was around that year,
Yeah.
if I remember
The
correctly.
the construction foreman had three daughters actually, and they had a little friend, and they used to play on the track that they would bring all the material up from the water, because back in those days there were no roads in that part of Florida,
Mm,
so everything came in by water, and they used to feel like, I guess, like roller coaster. They'd get on the track or the cart, they'd ride it down, hit the brakes like a roller coaster. Well, one day the brakes didn't work. The cart flipped over into the water, and two of the daughters and their little friend perished, died. But since that time, it's been reputed that the two daughters had been haunting the lighthouse and the grounds, but
mm,
particularly the lighthouse. Now, keeping that story in mind, we're now in the lighthouse, and you can't hear anything outside. We're just hearing the wind blowing inside. But Ryan and I clearly hear kids laughing. There was no mistaking it, and it
mm,
wasn't anything from the outside. So, as a cop, what do? I start looking for wires and speakers.
yeah,
I
but,
figure they're doing something to enhance the experience.
yeah, I know all about that. I've gone on the Queen Mary tour,
Uh,
and they have one that's a ghost tour where it's actual hauntings, the actual hauntings, and then they have like a Halloween version where they
uh,
add in the smoke and everything like that. So when you hear something, you want to double check to make sure that that's not what that is.
yeah, yeah. And I found nothing in the lighthouse that could have possibly uh, created these laughing sounds. So that's what really said, I've been dabbling this. I've been doing some investigations for a couple of years before that. Had some interesting experiences. Most of it in places we were investigating, because I was, like I said, running the academy at that time, so I was kind of a desk jockey, working the road only on the weekends and whatnot.
Mm,
Um, And but that's what got me going to actually decide to start using my background, my training, to begin to really investigate. And that was the birth of the Florida Bureau of Paranormal Investigation. And we had some cops, we got a fireman, we've had teachers, uh, just folks that are trying to find out what the answers are,
Yeah.
not going in with preconceived notions. And we've used our skills to begin investigating. And that's what we've been doing ever since about 2010, 2011, right in that area as a team.
Okay. So
Oh, absolutely. In fact, one of the things we're really actually my team as a whole, we're now starting on a trek where that's primarily what we're going to do. There's been some really interesting spots that we've done. One in particular is a place called the Devil's Tree. It's in a place called Port St. Lucie, Florida. It's about an hour south of me. I lived there for a number of years. And this is an old oak tree that used to sit back in the middle of the woods. Now, when I was there, this it was just in the middle of the woods. Now it's a park that sits around this tree. But what happened was this: there was a gentleman named Gerard Schaefer. Gerard Schaefer was a deputy sheriff in Martin County, Florida, which is south of us, and he was also a serial killer. Pretty dangerous combination. A man with a badge who's a serial killer. And he would take young ladies and he would kidnap them and do horrible things. He'd do a lot of his work while he was on duty. Well, this tree, this place called the Devil's Tree, it was an old oak tree sitting back near one of the large drainage canals in the area. And he would took victims back there and he did some unspeakable things. Uh, many years later, some bones were found back there by a fisherman and were identified as the remains of one of the victims, one of the girls that were missing. So it's a pretty evil place. Folks have gone back there for years and have claimed to have experiences. I remember talking to folks way back in the early 80s about the tree and deputies that used to go back there before the city had a police department would talk about bikers and gangs back there and as well as people practicing dark rituals back there and doing some crazy things. So it was a pretty ugly spot. uh, we actually as a team went back there and did two investigations, one day one night, and we got some pretty interesting things back there. We have a medium that we use, a gentleman named Chris Huff, brilliant medium, out of England actually, and he was able to come up with some really interesting things, including saying some of the bodies were still possibly there.
I probably
So,
wouldn't put it past it. I've been to
yeah.
many haunted locations myself.
Mhm,
I've been to some that have had satanic worship uh,
mhm,
things going on. I've been to probably one of the most famous, or close to probably one of the, as far as distance wise, not close, another way, but close to that. One of the most famous murder scenes, which was the Sharon Tate murders.
mhm.
Uh,
Oh yeah.
and I became friends with the David Oman, and I'm sure you've probably seen him on many paranormal TV shows if you've seen him. Uh, but his house is 150 feet away from where the Manson murders happened,
Mhm.
and his house is haunted. But when I first went there, I told the team that I was working with.
Well, and we find that with witnesses in crimes a lot. Sometimes they have preconceived notions about things, but also you could have two people standing there during an armed robbery,
Mm,
both witnessing the event at the same time. and their stories can be slightly different because how people perceive things, how they're feeling at the time, their emotions. So that's not unusual at all for people to have preconceived notions. So I agree with you. Going in there with little knowledge about specific hauntings, I think, is very important. In fact, with Chris, if I can interrupt you for a second,
Sure.
um, Chris, we don't tell him anything about where he's at, where he's with us, and he oftentimes joins us via the internet, which is pretty spectacular. Something I personally had real trouble believing and then understanding how it could happen is a better way to put it. But Chris is absolutely brilliant. We don't tell him anything, but he was
Mhm.
able to say that the person he saw on the crime scene or by the tree was a man in uniform. He said, "Was it a cop?" And it was. So that was some really nice validation of that particular scene.
Yeah, there are people like myself that can do remote viewing. We don't have to be at the location.
Mhm.
And speaking of
Right.
remote viewing, get back to that, not wanting to know anything. While my friend was driving, I was sitting in the passenger seat, trying to show him while he's driving 80 miles per hour down the freeway. Uh, and he's like, "Wait till we get there." And of course, I explained it. We got there. I explained it. I explained it to David Oman. And again, I didn't know nothing. And when I pointed out the spot to David Oman, he had that shocked look because in that exact spot that I pointed out when his house was being built, a 5 gallon bucket of water tipped uphill, which is impossible.
Interesting.
So I mean, it's one of the abilities that I have. But I mean, is there any other cases, maybe some kind of famous cases like the Manson murder that you have um, investigated locations?
Well, that one with Gerard Schaefer was probably the most prominent in this area. Certainly, we've been to jails, we've been to prisons, and had some pretty spectacular things happen. And of course, everything connected like that. There's a lot of emotion, not
Mm.
only because the crime, but also people like in jail, so they're locked up, and there's horrible things that happen in there. So those are some of the more interesting ones. Now we've got one case that's not really paranormal. They caught the guy that did it. It was back in 1950, a guy we call Barbecue Charlie. And uh, the place where he committed this murder, he got in a fight with a guy and ended up cutting him up and cooking him up in a 55-gallon drum, hence the name Barbecue Charlie. Uh, and that area is supposed to be fairly active. The problem with a lot of these crime scenes, if they're not in a public place, it's tough to get in. Now we've got two that are coming up that are in public areas that we're able to have access to, and there's going to be some that hopefully we're going to get access to private areas. But it's a little bit difficult to get to crime scenes like that sometimes when folks own it. Now I will tell you, we were doing a case. This is about 3 years ago now. We were asked to come to this small house built in the 1920s. And you got to understand, for 1920s for Florida is old, especially this neck of the woods,
Hmm.
because we're a fairly new state. This house was built in the 20s, and it's in the town of Sebastian. And the house had been turned into a retail shop, and it was a mystical shop. These folks sold uh, crystals and things like that.
Hmm.
We had heard about it because my daughter, who's also a cop, had been working that area and had responded to a burglary, burglar alarm call rather.
Hmm.
Went there, spoke with the key holders, the owners, and they found something in the middle of the floor that shouldn't have been there. Came off the walls. How did it get there? We don't know. The other shop owner had gone in to check the video feeds, and she was looking at it live and saw a shadow shoot by my daughter. And she came out and said, "Oh, this just happened." And they both the shop owners said, "Well, look, that stuff like this is happening all the time." So she said, "You need to call my dad." So they they called us. We came in. We began to investigate. Very very quiet up front. Chris was joining us that night via the video
The,
on the phone, on the
yeah.
computer. And of course, I've got earphones on. Nobody can hear him.
Mm,
Once again, he doesn't know anything about where we're at. In fact, we had no idea what we actually had there anyway. But he has no idea where we're at, none of the history or anything. Suddenly, he begins to talk about, or he gets to tell us there's a little girl there, about 5 years old. Her name is Lindy or Belinda, and she died. Stuff happened. Now, at the same time, we began to get hits on our other pieces of equipment, spirit box, dowsing rods, things like that, that were giving us that same information. Now, it's important to understand I had earphones on, so nobody could hear what Chris was saying.
yeah.
Yet these other, and that's how, one way we conduct our investigations. We usually have two or three different pieces of equipment going. We're trying to triangulate, if you will, events using different pieces of equipment to verify what we're getting.
Yeah.
Well,
Like me, I when because I spent 30 years in the paranormal field before
mhm,
retiring, and now I just talk about it. But anyways, I would go into locations usually mainly only with a digital recorder, if that, because a lot of people can say a lot of these electronics can be manipulated. Like I don't put much faith into spirit boxes, but that's just me because it's just picking up mostly frequencies from radio stations.
and
Um,
can't argue with that one. Can't argue with that.
but as far as equipment goes, I don't really put much stake in equipment, maybe a digital recorder. But I like to use my abilities when I'm going into a location. But yes, the equipment can be manipulated, but
Mhm.
it's harder to prove actual abilities than it is the equipment.
Well, isn't that the big problem? For starters, I think you'll agree there is not a piece of equipment yet that's ever been developed that definitively proves the existence of ghosts or the other side. There's no piece of equipment that can do that. Your ability, Chris's ability, is pretty substantial, but like you said, we can't prove. We have not yet found a way to prove that either. So
Mm.
that creates a little bit of a conundrum there that we just really can't prove it outside what folks like yourself, Chris, can see. I like to joke that I'm about as sensitive as a rock. And of course, coming from my profession, my background, I've got to have tangible evidence. I've got to have evidence I can take to court and prove to a jury of my peers
Mm.
that this exists or doesn't exist. And that is always the issue in paranormal investigations because nobody really truly knows what the phenomenon is. Now, I say that people like Chris, perhaps and yourself, um, can converse or can contact the other side, but the average person really doesn't have that ability. They're like, they have to depend on equipment, they have to
Mm.
depend on their own senses, but it's tough to prove all that.
Yeah, and
Um,
there are many cases that I've been on that I mean they've seen like a shadow figure
mhm,
running from room to room, and that's about the
mhm,
closest thing. But of course, unless you actually see it or capture it on camera, which
mhm,
when I started in the field, I was using the old 35 millimeter cameras with the
sure.
bought at the Kodak stand,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and had to wait for the film to be developed because those cameras were less likely to be manipulated. The film,
Mhm.
whereas digital cameras today, they can be easily manipulated with AI
Oh,
and everything else.
and AI is ruining the field, in my opinion, in so many ways because now it's everything is questionable
Mm.
because there's just so much out there with AI, you just don't know what's real anymore. But to get back to the story for just a second, because I think it's
Sure.
important, because it shows what research, and that's something I think that's lost sometimes in our field, in the paranormal community, is doing the research. And I've talked to some folks that do some great backgrounds and stuff, but in this particular case, we begin to get this information. This little girl's telling us all kinds of things, and my background is in crimes against children. I'll make a long story
Yeah.
short. She began saying some things that really made my antennas go up. So I start kind of going to cop mode. I'm asking questions. I'm asking her about what happened and who did this and what was that. And she's given us names. She talks about an Uncle Oscar that didn't mean to hurt her. I mean, apparently she had a lot of uncles coming over,
Mm.
mom, to visit mom. It was that type of situation. That's, at least that's what was being described to us. She talked about how Uncle Oscar didn't mean to hurt her, things like that. I'm asking her about, do you like TV? No. Do you like radio? Yes. Do you like this? I might mention some modern stuff. She said, no, no, no. Did you like Amos and Andy? Yes. So now I've got a period of time, 30s, 40s, right in that area. So I had my daughter, and then it went cold. Things just went cold. A few other little things happened, but the communication ended. So I had my daughter go back and check the old records of the police department. Of course, there were none indicating that a young child had died or had tragically met her end back in those days. But she did go around and check in with the superintendent over at the cemetery, who then called me, and then I went out to see him. And he tells me this story. He tells me about a week prior to my daughter going out there, they got visited by a family from New York that was down visiting a family plot. Harold Fear was the grave site in particular, and the superintendent and the husband, the father, started talking about kids that were buried in the cemetery.
Mm.
And the guy says, "Yeah, yeah, we had a like a shirt, and this is my term, shirt tail, but like a distant relative that lived down here, and her name was Belinda, and she was 5 years old, and she died tragically, and we don't know exactly how." And then we went to Belinda's gravesite. Now, the reason I'm bringing this story up, talk about a crime scene, I believe that we're working a possibly unsolved homicide.
Yeah.
Because how in the world in this house, a good mile and a half away from the cemetery, and this tiny little grave that was only about this wide, that the size of a child, the
Mm.
tombstone was hand carved, and you couldn't even get a rubbing off of it anymore. How did we get the name and age of this child that died tragically? And there's her gravesite. There's no way we could have known that. Now,
Now,
here's the other
did
interesting.
your medium pick up the, that she might have died at that house?
Oh yeah, yeah. There's no question she did. She basically said that Uncle Oscar took her outside. She was down by the water. They brought her back, but he didn't mean to hurt her. There was all kinds of things like that. There's no question she identified the house. But we also found through our research, and this is where research really comes into play and helps. And coincidence, maybe, but uh, research we found that there was a gentleman named Oscar who died in 2017 at the age of 100,
Mm.
less than a mile from this house.
Wow.
Coincidence? I don't know, but I got to bring it back to how were we able through Chris, through our equipment, and I agree with you on the equipment, by the way. But
Yeah.
when you get two or three things that are hitting, and you get the medium telling you the same thing, and then you find the gravesite, pretty
Yeah.
significant.
Well, like me, I don't believe in coincidence. I believe that
I don't either.
everything has a rhyme and reason for it happening. What that
I
reason
agree.
is, we might not know. We might know, but um, just everything seems to come together for a certain reason.
I
And
agree. Well, and we're working on, unfortunately, the superintendent didn't get the names of the people in New York, so we're still trying to put all that together. So, and it's taking a long time because there's not much to work with on this other than the names and the dates and something happening to this child. But that's what really gets my blood flowing for this type of work and why we're going to be spending, I can't really go into it now, but there's one case we're going to be working just north of us. that is, they still haven't recovered of the body. But we believe that there's been some attempt by something on the other side to reach back out based upon some testimony that's come to us. So we're gonna be spending a lot of time working on that case and similar cases, um, where crimes have not been solved. Well, and it could be a violent crime, may not even be a homicide, it could be just an accidental death, a suicide. But that's really what we're going to be focusing on is these crime scenes, not to not to supersede what law enforcement has done.
Mhm.
Heck, I tell you what, I had a lot of trouble believing mediums when I was on the job. I
Yeah,
did. I would get people calling me saying the weapon's here, the person's there, and they never panned out. Took me a long time to realize that there are folks with this ability, uh, and and I think law enforcement actually is beginning to open up their minds a
yeah.
little
I
bit.
think a lot of people, especially, I think it kind of started with, I believe, Ghost Whisperer is when that TV show was on, when it started opening, I think, more law enforcement to kind of rely on maybe somebody like myself to
Hmm.
help solve the case. That maybe they got something where they saw something like yourself in the jail cell that they
Hmm.
couldn't explain and they delve more into it.
Hmm. Well, I think actually it started a little bit before that. A lot of folks in our community take shots at or have negative comments about the TV shows. And there's no question, I don't like cop shows. You know why? Because I would go to a burglary and somebody would say, well, did you get a fingerprint? Run it through your thing in the car and you could find out who did it. Well, no, that's not how it works. Well, that's how they did it on NCIS, NCIS, show or one of the TV shows. So I get that folks don't enjoy, have a negative view of what paranormal shows have done to the paranormal field.
Yeah, I'm the same way with
But
the paranormal shows.
but those shows are the ones that brought it to the forefront and got people talking about it and took away the stigma. Classic example is when I first came on the job, you didn't talk about this stuff, maybe to your zone partners or whatever, but you didn't talk about this stuff. The boss would send you for a fit for duty psych eval if you did.
Yeah,
But nowadays, it's talked about regularly, not only with cops, but firefighters and EMTs. ER docs and nurses have had experiences. I've talked to many of them that have had experiences also. So it's become more in the forefront. So I think that the TV shows have helped at least take that stigma away and allowed us to at least open up the conversation and begin to try and find the answers. But we in the field, I'll throw this out too, we in the field have got to do more to share and to come up with a better investigatory plan to collect evidence and share the evidence.
yeah, because a lot of, and I found this, this is probably another reason why I got out of the field after 30 years, is a lot of infighting. And it's
Oh,
like
yeah.
we're all trying to find the same thing. We're trying to find the proof of the afterlife. We're trying to prove the existence of spirits. Um,
Mhm.
we're trying to prove all this. And I know, like the TV shows, I kind of have problems with the TV shows because a lot of people see the TV shows on the paranormal and think, oh, I can do that. And in reality, I've had to tell people what you're seeing is only an hour's worth of time that it takes to actually do an investigation. Like me, we did pre interviews with the people that we helped or
Mhm.
the sites we investigated. Um, of course, I wasn't part of that, but because I didn't want to know anything. But we did that. We spent hours setting up cameras sometimes on
Mhm.
larger locations, which you don't see on the TV shows. And all this stuff, the hours that takes to take down the stuff, or the maybe the 30 minutes to an hour sitting in a dark room and you're not hearing nothing. You don't see that on the TV shows.
Nope. 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 And I think that's a huge problem too. That You're right, and there's been a bunch of what I call them paranormal thrill seekers, and that's okay if you want to go out on the weekend to get that adrenaline rush from hearing that door slam in the middle of the night, or maybe catching EVP. That's fine, but if you're going to be a serious researcher, if you're really going to try and find the answers, and that's kind of where my team and I come from, we're trying to find answers. You've got to train. You've got to have standards with which you do things by. You've got to have structure. You've got to know what you're doing. How many people do you know that have picked up a piece of equipment and can actually tell you what that equipment, what's the science behind it? For example, the ovulus. Has anybody really successfully discussed the science behind the ovulus, except that there's a bank of words that the other side can manipulate?
Hmm.
Well, how? How can they manipulate it? Those are the types of things that we've got to start answering for any of that to be considered really solid evidence. I mean, it's thrilling when we get it, and if we get two or three things, then that's like I said, what we try and do is get two or three pieces of equipment to corroborate.
Yeah.
But people have got to get some training.
Yeah, and there's also the people that like to go out there and think of they're gonna see these spirits and everything like that, and they
Mhm.
trespass on private property, I've it gave paranormal teams a lot of bad names uh,
Oh
when
boy, I've run into
people would
that.
go into the cemeteries and destroy the headstones. We're out there trying to do research, and you're giving legitimate teams like me and your team bad names.
Well, and I actually do in our Paranormal 101 class as well as the standalone, I actually do a section on ethics in the paranormal. I mean, part of if we want to grow, if we want to continue, we have to have an ethical standard as well as a training standard.
Mm.
And you can't do exactly what you can't trespass, you can't damage things, you can't lie to people. Oh my gosh, how many times have you run into teams where somebody said, I can rid the house, and they can't, they don't they I mean, they maybe know how to put a match to the sage and wave it around, but they really don't have any training to do that.
Oh
or
yeah,
or,
I've
or make
plenty of times.
or making promises to clients that they can do something when they don't have the ability. Sometimes people do it with the belief that they can. They may even have all the best intentions, but when it comes down to it, they can't. So there's an ethical side to this to what we do that I don't think a lot of people really understand, and not even for a negative reason, not for any ill reason. They just don't understand. We have to put ethics into what we do.
Mhm. And
Mhm. 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 And
it dragged me out, which I knew would never happen. But I've had done that kind of work, but not everybody can do that work. And
no,
some people think, oh, I can do this, and then they just make the situation even worse.
do you find that it's mostly people that are their intentions are good, or do you find mostly it's folks that are charlatans trying to take advantage in your opinion?
There's quite a bit that are trying to take advantage. They're trying to make an extra buck, like psychics. There are people out there that are trying to make that extra buck, and then there's people like myself that can do the readings. I've had people call me charlatan before. It's like, I didn't give you a reading. I gave your family member a reading, and they believed every word, and I backed it up with proof. But
Mhm.
you wanted to think that I was taking them for their money. No, I'm trying to help them out, move on from a trauma, or get answers to what they're seeking.
But what do you think we need to do to insulate folks from those that want to take advantage? And how do we take folks that really don't are not trying to take advantage? They're just maybe unlearned about what they need to do or how to conduct themselves. What do we need to do to protect folks from both those sides, the charlatans and the folks that have good intentions but really don't know what they're doing? What do we need to do?
I don't know if there's a way that we can. um, just because there's too many people out there that I mean, I'm trying to remember the name. I know it's Randy. I can't think.
Hmm. There are folks like, and when you get one person that gets broadcasted, it gets advertised, showing that they are charlatans. It taints everybody, and that's coming from the cop side. Trust me, most folks in my profession are good, honest, hardworking people, but one person does something wrong and it taints us all. It's the same thing in the paranormal community. And we've got to find a way to get around that. And that's why I'm a big believer in standards and training.
You brought up skepticism. I know I mention a lot of times when I'm going into a location, even though I can see and communicate with the spirit world, I always bring in a little bit of skepticism, because if I don't, and that's another problem. A lot of people new to the field or just wanting to get in
Hmm.
believe this stuff and don't want to actually do the investigating, or try to figure out what is going on. Like, say there's a noise in the wall. Well, that doesn't mean there's a spirit knocking on the wall. That means that there could be an animal in there. There could be pipes in there that are
Hmm.
banging around there making that noise.
Hmm.
So you cannot go off like, here, knock on the wall, and be like, oh, that's a spirit, because then you're just opening yourself to ridicule. Whereas I like to kind of ask questions and kind of like say not twice, if this and this, and if it does that, then I'll follow it up with another question and try to root out the possibility of animal or pipe in the wall.
Hmm. Always find the logical answer first. That's got to be a standard.
Yeah. Now, now everybody on your team does go into the location with like somewhat of a skepticism, correct?
Well, skepticism is important. I mean, as a law enforcement officer, you can't go in with preconceived notions, so none of us do. Everybody takes a look at it in an honest, open-minded way. And there's always some skepticism. I can give you a pretty good example. We were in a house called the May Stringer House over in Brooksfield, Florida, and we took a picture, and it looked like from a ceiling hatch that was covered by glass that there were figures looking down at us, and my team got real excited really quick because it did. You could see heads and shoulders. but took the time to go back and examine the photograph closer, and it became very obvious after just a few minutes of looking at it, it was reflection.
Hmm.
And that's
I've
what
ran
you've got to
into
do.
that plenty of times too.
But that's what you got to do to be successful. And if we're going to, if this field's going to grow, as I hope it will, the community, I should say, we've got to have some level of standards.
Yeah, because see, I started in or I got started with inspiration from people like Ed and Lorraine Warren when
Hmm.
the paranormal field was not as big as it is now.
Hmm.
And a lot of people today see the shows and think, okay, I can do it this way. But I learned the hard.
Old school. We don't do a lot of private residences unless somebody calls and they have a legitimate, they have an issue going on. And then, of course, myself and my lead investigator go do a private meeting, do an interview, and talk with the folks. And at that point, we decide whether or not we're going to continue on. Private residents, understand something. Our team is not designed to help rid anything. We are there to identify if
Mhm.
there's a problem and what's possibly causing it. So unless it's something severe, we don't do a lot of residences. We tend to do historical sites. Uh,
Okay.
we tend to do buildings, both commercial and historical buildings. Uh, and we're gathering evidence and we catalog the evidence and we're trying to uh, come up with the answers as to what it is. So we don't do a whole lot of residences because of that. Only on exceptional times where there's issues that the folks just need some help with. I mean, we're not going to
Yeah.
turn anybody away. And I think one important thing is, especially on a residence, we never charge a penny. And in my
Yeah.
opinion, I think that's a hallmark to folks that are in the community doing, particularly residential investigations. You don't charge to go help somebody.
Yeah. Well, like I tell people, we don't charge a thing, so don't give us any money because then you can come back. They can come back and say, "Well, you just did it for the money." And I had
Exactly.
one location that wanted to pay us $300 for helping them out, and I said,
Mhm,
"Don't give us the money. Take it." And this was in Southern California,
mhm.
and I said, "Take that money, go to Loma Linda Children's Hospital, and put it in our team's name as
There
a
you go.
charity.
Sure.
Don't give us the money. We're not here to take the money. We're here
Mhm,
to help you out."
mhm.
And
I agree.
they got mad that we didn't want to take the money, but they did it anyways and took the money to Loma Linda and gave it to the children's hospital.
Nice, nice.
So we have, let's see, we got some minutes. Okay, we got a couple more minutes before um, I get things ready to end the show. But tell people about Indian River County hauntings.
Indian River Hauntings is it was what I call the outreach for the FBPI, Florida Bureau of Paranormal Investigation. I retired the first time from the state, went out to this little town called Fellsmere in the northwestern part of our county. Just a small little town. I was their detective there for a while, and people found out what my side gig was. And next thing I know, folks are saying, "Look, you need to uh, talk to this person or come to this place." And Fellsmere is an interesting town. We don't have enough time to really go into it now, but
Yeah,
it's probably one of the most haunted spots in our entire area. And sure enough, we brought the team out there. We were getting incredible things. Some of them were, I even wrote a book, Haunted Indian River County, outlining the stuff that we found, and particularly in Fellsmere. And from that, folks, it was, hey, can you talk to our uh, Rotary Club? Can you take our Cub Scout pack on a tour of the city? So that gave birth to Indian River Hauntings. And what we've tried to do is take folks on tours, not only to share the haunted aspect of it, but more importantly, the historical aspect of the entire area. whether it be Fellsmere, Vero Beach, Sebastian, we conduct those tours under, and that's what we call Indian River hauntings
Okay.
for those tours, and we do them regularly. And that's not an investigation; it's just sharing folks, sharing the history, the haunted history of our area to
Okay.
folks that
So
want to learn more.
basically, like Fort Worth does ghost walks and talk about the haunted
Yes,
history and the
sure,
stockyards. So it's
exactly.
something like that. It's not actually taking people on tours of the haunted location.
We've done no, no, we have done that. We had a thing that we did for years called Dinner to Ghost Hunt, where we would take people on an event. We are pretty much doing just the tours now. That's it. Uh, but that's separate apart from the investigatory. And now the FBPI team does help on the Indian River haunting side, but the investigative side and the tour are two separate entities, but they share the same goal of bringing truth to folks.
Okay, and tell people where they can find more information about Indian River County hauntings and the Federal
Sure.
Bureau. Uh, sorry,
Federal Florida
Federal
Bureau. Don't
Bureau
say
of
federal.
Paranormal
Florida Bureau.
Investigations.
Yeah, so
My
you can
brain did not want to work right there for a moment.
you can go to find us at IndianRiverHauntings.com, all one word, IndianRiverHauntings.com. That'll take you to both the FBPI and the IRH websites. And our FBPI side, we have some of our past investigations, some evidence that's up there, and you can learn a little bit more about us. Check us out on Facebook, Indian River Hauntings, or Florida Bureau of Paranormal Investigation on Facebook. You can also check us out on YouTube. If you want to see some of our investigations, we're usually putting some of our investigations up there a few weeks after we do them. You can find us at the @ Indian River Hauntings 2341, at Indian River Hauntings 2341. If you want to see what we do, the site's not monetized. We do not make any money to do that.
All right. All right. Well, we are almost out of time here. I want to thank you for coming on the show,
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
and it was a pleasure having you on. And if anybody's listening on the Talking of the Night website, talkingofthenight.com, I have all Larry's information up there, his websites, links to him. Go check him out over on Talking of the Night and go to his website and check out that. And if you're in the area, check out his haunting tours. And again, thank you again for coming on the show. And if you are interested in what the show talks about, go to talkingtonight.com. Check out all the stuff that I got on there. I got list of the guests coming up, upcoming shows. I got um, stories of the day, a lot of
Thank you.